You booked the flight 8 months ago. The hotel, the excursions, the little notebook where you tracked what you'd spend on dinners. All of it priced out in your head, all of it a done deal. Then you land, you tap your card at a cafe for a coffee and a pastry, and the receipt makes no sense. Not because the prices went up, because a number you never thought about, a number that has nothing to do with the cafe, the coffee, or you, quietly decided what your money is worth the moment you crossed a border. The same trip, booked at the same price, in the same season, can come home costing you noticeably more or noticeably less than you planned for. And nothing about the destination changed at all. Everybody knows the obvious version of this. Different countries, different money, you need to exchange it. That's obvious. What's less obvious is that the number you're exchanging at isn't a fixed conversion, like inches to centimeters, printed once and true forever. It moves. It moves for reasons that have almost nothing to do with your vacation, and almost everything to do with decisions made in rooms you'll never see. Interest rate meetings, trade negotiations, capital flowing toward wherever it earns the most that quarter. You are not exchanging currency. You are catching a live price, set by forces with zero interest in your trip, at the exact moment you happen to need it. And once you see that, you stop asking, how strong is the dollar right now, and start asking a better question. Whose economy is currently winning the argument that number represents? Because that argument, not the airfare, not the hotel rate, is what's actually paying for, or quietly eating, your vacation. Start with the clean version, the one that shows up in an introductory textbook. A currency's exchange rate is supposed to be the price that keeps trade in balance. Economists call the long-run anchor for this purchasing power parity. The idea is almost mechanical. If a burger costs $5 in Chicago and the same burger costs €4 in Berlin, then over time the dollar-euro exchange rate should drift toward a level where $5 and €4 buy the same real stuff. If a currency looks so cheap that everything priced in it becomes a steal for outsiders, the theory says demand for that currency should rise until the discount disappears. Money is just a stand-in for goods, and the exchange rate is supposed to be the price that makes the stand-ins equivalent everywhere. This isn't a fringe theory. The Economist has run an actual version of it since 1986, when a writer there started comparing Big Mac prices across dozens of countries to flag currencies that look overvalued or undervalued against the dollar. It's presented as a joke, half burger, half economics textbook, but the mechanism underneath it is real. In the simple model, exchange rates are a slow-moving thermostat, quietly correcting toward the price of a shared basket of goods. And your vacation currency is basically just tracking how expensive bread and burgers are back home versus wherever you happen to be standing. Here's where that model runs into a wall it can't explain. If exchange rates were really just a thermostat for goods prices, they'd barely move. Burger prices don't swing 10% in a season. They creep up gradually with everything else. But currencies swing 10%, 20%, sometimes 40% in a matter of months, and no amount of burger inflation can account for a move that size. That's because trade in goods is a tiny fraction of what's actually moving through currency markets on any given day. The overwhelming majority of foreign exchange trading isn't tourists buying euros or exporters getting paid in yen, it's capital chasing yield. When one country's interest rates rise relative to another's, money floods toward the higher return, bidding up that currency regardless of what a burger costs there. This is the carry trade, and it's the real engine room underneath the number you see quoted at the airport kiosk. In the early 1980s, the Federal Reserve under Paul Volcker pushed interest rates into the high teens to break double-digit inflation left over from the 1970s. That single move made dollar-denominated assets extraordinarily attractive to global capital, and the dollar surged, up roughly 45 to 50% against major currencies between 1980 and its peak in early 1985. A spike that had nothing to do with America suddenly becoming more efficient at making burgers or cars. It had everything to do with yield. By 1985, that strength had become its own problem. American exports were getting crushed on price. The trade deficit had ballooned past $120 billion, and the world's largest economies had to sit down at the Plaza Hotel in New York that September and deliberately engineer the dollar back down through coordinated intervention. It's the financial equivalent of a game's difficulty curve getting reset by the developers mid-run, not by anything the players did. Forget the thermostat. The exchange rate you see quoted on any given day is closer to a scoreboard for a competition between economies over who's currently offering the best return on capital. And your vacation is just standing in the blast radius of that competition. Arriving with a suitcase and no idea a fight over yield is what actually set today's price. Now here's where this starts costing you money in a way that has nothing to do with interest rates at all. It happens in the 4 seconds after you tap your card. When a merchant abroad offers to charge you in your home currency instead of the local one, would you like to pay in dollars? That sounds like a convenience, maybe even a courtesy. It's actually a second, smaller version of the exact same mechanism, run by the merchant instead of a central bank. It's called dynamic currency conversion, and it lets the merchant's payment processor pick the exchange rate rather than your card network. quietly baking in a markup of anywhere from 3 to 7% before your bank even gets involved. Your own bank might then tack on a separate foreign transaction fee on top of that, usually somewhere around 1 to 3%. None of this shows up as a fee line item you'd notice. It shows up as a slightly worse number buried inside the conversion itself, one you'd need to already know the real market rate to catch. That's exactly why almost nobody notices it. The markup is disguised as the exchange rate doing its job, not as a charge someone added. This is the direct, personal version of the mechanism the Fed and the Plaza Accord operated at the national scale. Someone else gets to set the exchange rate you're subjected to. And if you don't understand that the rate itself is a variable rather than a fixed fact stamped on a currency, you'll never think to ask who's setting it or whether they're setting it in your favor. The trip you priced out 8 months ago wasn't just exposed to one macro currency swing between the day you booked and the day you flew. It was exposed to dozens of tiny local reruns of that same swing at every card terminal, every airport ATM, every convenience prompt. That lets somebody else quote the price of your own money back to you and pocket the spread. It's a bit like a game quietly nerfing your gold-to-item exchange rate at every vendor without changing the sticker price on a single item. The number on the screen looks the same, but what you're actually getting for it has already been shaved down before you ever see the total. Here's the part almost no one thinks about. This mechanism doesn't just make your trip cost more or less, it reshuffles who wins and who loses in the destination country itself, and the two groups experience the exact same currency move as opposite events. Take Iceland after 2008. Iceland's 3 major banks collapsed under debt worth more than 10 times the country's entire economic output, and the krona went down with them. A currency in genuine freefall by most measures. For Icelandic households, that was brutal. Imported goods, fuel, anything priced in foreign currency got sharply more expensive overnight. National income per person fell hard, and the country entered a real economic contraction that took years to climb out of. But for a traveler holding dollars or euros, that same collapsed krona meant Iceland, traditionally one of the most expensive destinations in Europe, was suddenly a bargain. Tourism to Iceland roughly doubled in the years that followed the crash. Budget carriers built entire route networks around the cheap krona and the newly affordable stopover. And a country that used to price out backpackers became a budget darling practically overnight. A volcanic eruption 2 years later gave the story a headline, but the currency collapse is what actually built the runway underneath it. Same number, same currency move, 2 completely different experiences depending on which side of the exchange rate you happen to be standing on. This is the general shape of every currency swing. It's never simply more expensive or cheaper in the abstract. It's a transfer, quietly moving purchasing power from whoever holds the weakening currency to whoever holds the strengthening one. Your vacation savings balance and a line cook's grocery bill in the country you're visiting are reading the exact same number off the exact same board and walking away with opposite verdicts. Stop, because this is the piece that actually changes how you should plan around it, and it breaks the assumption most people never examine. You'd think a strong home currency is unambiguously good for a traveler, full stop. More purchasing power, better exchange rate, cheaper trip. And in the moment, it is. But a currency that's strong because your home economy is running hot on high interest rates is often the same currency that's making your mortgage, your car loan, and your credit card balance more expensive at the exact same time, for the exact same reason. The favorable exchange rate on your trip and the unfavorable rate you're paying on debt back home are 2 readouts of the identical mechanism. Capital being rewarded for holding your currency. You don't get to keep the discount on Renaissance sculpture tours in Florence without also carrying the cost of that same yield somewhere else in your financial life. It's less a windfall than a redistribution you're only seeing one side of, like farming a resource that's suddenly valuable without noticing the price of everything else you need just went up to match. Zoom out and the whole picture reorganizes. An exchange rate isn't a fixed backdrop to your trip, the way a time zone is. It's not just sitting there, stable, waiting to be looked up. It's a live, continuously updating vote, cast by capital, not by tourists, on which economy currently offers the best return. And every dollar, euro, or yen you spend abroad is priced against the outcome of that vote in real time. The textbook thermostat exists, but it operates on a timescale of years, while the actual number on your receipt is set by an interest rate arms race operating on a timescale of days, plus a smaller, more predatory version of the same mechanism sitting inside the payment terminal in front of you. That's 3 separate layers stacked on top of each other every time you spend money in another country. A slow structural anchor almost nobody feels, a fast capital-driven swing that can move your whole budget before you even land, and a point-of-sale skim engineered to slip past you entirely. Once you can see all 3 layers, you stop treating the exchange rate as one fact and start treating it as a stack of separate decisions. One made by a central bank on the other side of the planet, one made by traders reacting to that decision within hours. and one made by a merchant 3 feet in front of you, and the last one is the only layer you can actually outplay in the moment. Decline the pay in your home currency prompt every time. The local currency option almost always routes through your card network's real rate instead of the merchant's padded one. Carry a card with no foreign transaction fee, since that's a discount that costs you nothing to claim. And treat the timing of discretionary international spending the way you'd treat any other price that moves, with a cycle you can actually watch, rather than something to just accept as a fixed cost of leaving the country. If this kind of breakdown is useful, seeing the machinery instead of just the sticker price, that's the whole channel. 8-bit economics exists to strip systems like this one down to their actual mechanics. No hype, no predictions about where any currency is headed next. Just the underlying code running underneath the numbers you deal with every day, whether that's a receipt abroad or the rate on your savings account back home. If you want more of this, subscribe. If this one changed how you'll look at your next receipt in another country, hit like. And if you've got your own dynamic currency conversion story, the moment you caught the machine trying to quietly reprice your own money, drop it in the comments. Those are usually the best part of this feed. By the time everyone sees it coming, the smart play is already over. The exchange rate on the departures board was never really about your vacation. It was a scoreboard for a much bigger game that happened to be running underneath your feet the whole time, long before you booked anything. And now that you know how to read it, you'll never look at a currency conversion the same way again.